Hello, I'm here ready to chat about stuff. Um, we got a lot to cover today, including the midterm review. So I think it's important if we just hop in and get going, so I don't have to keep everyone around longer than they need to be here. Okay. So we're going to start with Baroque, the Baroque period, and go into slideshow. Should know how to do this already, but oh. So Baroque art. So the main purpose of the Baroque period was after the Protestant Reformation, when the Protestants broke off of the Catholic Church and they started the Protestant Reformation. They were pretty successful, and that was all going on in Northern Europe. But down in Italy, they wanted to reinvigorate the domination of Catholicism. So they started the Counter-Reformation. So they did that. One of their main tactics was in art, and using art kind of like as a way to inspire people. It wasn't not so much like propaganda, but because they really believed in that stuff, so they wanted to pull everybody back into the wonderful arms of the church. And so that kind of leads me to my little metaphor here of St. Peter's Basilica. So this is Vatican City here. This is the Basilica back here with the dome on it. And they commissioned Bernini to develop these, dang it, forgot I had my pen on here. He developed these colonnades here, these long kind of classical inspired structures. So he thought of them kind of like as arms reaching out from the basilica here to the people and kind of embracing them. So that was the idea behind that theme. And so Bernini kind of became the leader of art for the Baroque period. In Baroque, you can tell something's Baroque because they're going to pick the most dramatic part of the story to tell, and the piece is going to be very dynamic, full of motion and like drama. So this is Bernini's version of David. You can see, the story of David. There's like the monster Goliath, and David's like one boy by himself against the monster, the giant, and he's got he chose a different way to tell this story. So he's got his armor on the ground here. That's what this thing is in the back, and then he's got his lyra on the ground here. So he's doffed his armor because he'll be protected by God. And the lyre on the ground is to show that he's a bard and he traveled around singing gospels and stuff. But he, if you look at the other versions of this sculpture, like by the one by Michelangelo, he's perfectly up and down, straight posture. I mean, he's got this cocked contrapposto thing that we talked about, but he's holding, he's holding the sling over his shoulder, and he's holding the rock in his right hand, and he's like pondering the action he's about to take. So it's before the main action, whereas Donatello, he's standing on the head of the giant, so it's after the main action. Whereas Bernini goes for the height of the action, like right before he kills the giant. So that's a really good example to get into the rest of like Baroque ideals and what they were aiming at. And then I just want to talk about a little bit about how amazing Bernini was as a sculptor. So this is the abduction of Proserpina. This is Pluto trying to take Proserpina to the underworld. And, she's struggling to get away. There's nothing inactive about this sculpture. Like everything is in movement and like packed full of energy. And then, but also look at the subtlety of this hand pressing into the flesh here. It's like, it makes you forget that it's marble, it's so amazing. And it's like his understanding of like muscle and flesh, you can see how there's that bone running down the leg from where your great trochanter enters the hip right here and then goes all the way down here somewhere. So, but right in the middle here, there's more bone, and here there's more flesh, so that you can see the indentation here is bigger than up here. It's just like, I don't know, it's so beautiful and amazingly contrived. This is another great example of that Baroque intensity. This is the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa. So this is the moment where the angel comes down to the nun and stabs her through the heart with this spear of gold that like invigorated her with the love of God. So like, it's kind of like hard to describe a little bit, but so he's trying to make something physical that's like a spiritual idea. And I think a lot gets made about this being like sexualized with her like face and the word ecstasy. But to me, it's really hard to imagine that like Bernini was thinking that she was having an orgasm because of God. I think it's more about just her being filled with the pure passion of spirituality. And like, and again, this is like this Baroque idea of you can have that if you return to Catholicism. So they're trying to beat everybody over the heads with that idea. And then also this is a giant installation in this building, but check out this thick cloth that he's rendered here to this thin wispy cloth to like hair to wings to flesh to like this golden arrow that the angel has. So crazy. Okay, next piece. Annabella Carracci. So this is when we're starting to move into these more naturalistic landscapes. If you remember, like Leonardo had those giant figures in the foreground, and even Raphael was biting him a little, like ripping him off. And then the landscape was little in the back, or even like the Mona Lisa, But this is more organized to like, something you might see in the real world, and something according to like uh, say divine law and human reason. So basically naturalism. So instead of like going out and like using all these strict rules of like linear perspective, that we've talked about that Brunelleschi invented, like he's trying to let nature dictate the composition to him. So you have this like beautiful landscape with these little figures in here, and this is like the story of Mary and Joseph like leaving, going to Egypt, and they're just kind of like, I mean, they're in the front and the middle, but the whole painting is mostly landscape, and they're kind of diminished by that. It's kind of like so it's kind of like a new take on that classic idea. Okay, Caravaggio. So this is a huge breakthrough when Caravaggio comes along with the way that he painted and organized things and what he chose to paint. It's super Baroque and super Italian. Caravaggio is a bit of a jerk in real life, though. He thought he would rail against artists that came before him that he didn't like their paintings of. That wasn't a very good sentence. Like people that came before him, like that were revered. He would hate on them. Art critics called him the Antichrist of painting. He went to trial 11 times because of how many crimes he's committed. He might have killed a guy. There was a rumor about that. He was a big drinker and fighter, and he'd carry a sword around and stuff. So it wasn't like, but he was also like really smart. But he wasn't like this like, intellectual, like gentle Renaissance man like Leonardo, where he was like getting invited to like diplomatic lunches and sitting with kings and stuff. This guy was like mixing it up, like out with the people. So I kind of bring some of that into his paintings here. So here we have the calling of St. Matthew, which is a very traditional, beloved subject, but he's humbleized it. Is that a word? He's made it more humble, and brought this like naturalism to this sacred idea. So what's going on here? We have Christ is this figure right here. You can see his little baby halo. It's just a hint at a halo. And then he's gesturing here and pointing towards this guy, who's Levi. At this point, he hasn't become St. Matthew yet. He's still a regular guy. And he has a job. He was a tax collector. So these guys are like sitting in a bar counting out this money here. So this idea that he's not like, this celestial figure floating with a halo behind him. He's just some guy sitting in a bar doing his day job. This is like crazy. This is why people didn't like him at the time. But we'll see how many people Caravaggio influenced after this. It's kind of bananas, like to this day. So yeah, Jesus is calling on St. Matthew here, and we get this direction with the light pointing at him, and then you can see this other trick that he does is like called tenebrism or tenebrism, where it's kind of like this heightened chiaroscuro, where it's not just light emerging from darkness. It's like extreme there's only really shadow and highlight. There's not much midtone. I mean, there's a little bit right here, but and a little bit here. But most of this is just like blatant highlights and darkness. And that was like really crazy revolutionary stuff at the time. So again, it heightened that drama, which made it very Baroque. And, he's picking the most dramatic part of the story, like the moment where St. Matthew gets chosen. But yeah, he knows his art history. I wanted to mention this piece too, because so he's used that the hand actually from Adam, not from God, on Jesus to show that he's of Adam. Like earthly. Okay. So on this one, you can see how far he's pushed this tenebrism. I got to figure out if I'm saying tenebrism. I've read it so many times that then it's like when you say it out loud, you're like tenebrism, tenebrism. I think depends if you're British or not. So yeah, let's look at this super high contrast light and darkness here. And this is that that same moment we've seen in this Duccio painting. And look at how simplified Caravaggio's made this event. He's zoomed in. There's only, say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 figures in this. And Duccio's got this whole mess of people. Also, Duccio was doing a bit of this continuous narrative. So this was the moment where Judas kisses Christ to point him out to the Roman soldiers, which you can see is still happening here. And then, but it has like these guys over here on the right are fleeing after that happened. You can see some of the same guys, like old purple cloak and green with orange. And so you're getting two parts of that story over here. Caravaggio is much more advanced than that. You can see it's like 200 years later, getting this, I don't want to say photorealistic because that's kind of like it's a whole own art genre, like much later in life, much later in time. But it is very realistic. Yeah, it's at night, there's no background, and it makes that emotional impact so much more pronounced because you have to see that one specific interaction here and all these little nuances like holding this hand gesture and this guy back here screaming. It really heightens the intensity. And yeah, just another example of that highest moment of drama here. So we have the Judith beheading Holofernes, and this is a story about Judith was a widow, and her town was besieged by this Assyrian army. So she sneaks in to seduce Holofernes at night with her handmaiden, and then when he falls asleep, he gets drunk and falls asleep, and then she cuts his head off with the help of her handmaiden here. So yeah, this painting's amazing. So he's really zoomed in on this event. It's super black in the background and super white in the foreground. And she has this look of kind of ambivalence where she doesn't really know how she feels about it. I think the old woman kind of knows how to feel about it. He knows how to feel about it. Unhappy. But when we move forward a little bit, we have Artemisia Gentileschi. So she's kind of a follower of Caravaggio. She was a big fan. So here we have the same subject matter. She's doing that tenebrism, but her depiction is much more direct. Like Judith is in there, she's got her both hands hard at work, like jamming that sword in the neck. There's blood squirting out towards her. Her handmaiden is helping, holding down Holofernes. And then I like highlighted these. All the limbs are pointing the action directly to the center. This is some kind of like inverted high Renaissance triangle going on, also divided by this straight lines of the bedding here. So you get this super organized version of this painting. Yeah, and I just want to do that side-by-side view of that painting. And then you can see the dates where Artemisia was a few years later. So she definitely saw this painting and was like, I'm going to make my own. I think it's just interesting to look at two versions of the same thing around the same time period. And she has kind of like, it's fun to look at her painting and imagine her as a woman painting it as opposed to a man of Caravaggio painting this. And they're like how they perceived the same event. It's kind of fun to look at. I feel like Artemisia's, you can tell that Judith definitely wants to cut that guy's head off, where in Caravaggio's, she's not super sure about it. Jose de Ribera. So Spain was into the Counter-Reformation and Catholicism, and martyrdom was a very hot topic over there. It's highly emotional, very dramatic and inspiring for someone to be martyred and make a painting of that. This guy was another fan of Caravaggio. And so this is that key moment of his martyr here, St. Philip, where the moment where he's being raised up onto the cross. And you can see this guy over here is like pulling the legs out from under this poor guy, and look how hard these guys are struggling to raise him up. And then you have this woman here looking at the viewer, having this knowing look of kind of like the viewer is part of the horrific event. Yeah, and these are like non-idealized figures. They're very natural looking. This guy looks like he works on a boat or something. Moving forward to another Spaniard here, we have Diego Velázquez, probably one of the greatest painters. It's funny in the book, it kind of says that all the time. It always wants to like say who the greatest painter of each like genre or each like time period. They're like definitively Diego Velázquez was the greatest painter. It's like I think he was like the most famous painter, but I do like him a lot. So He did do a lot of religious paintings. He has this Virgin Mary painting that's like amazing. I should have included it now that I'm thinking about it. But he was a court painter for King Philip. We'll show him in a second. But this is Las Meninas. So Las Meninas translates to ladies in waiting. So we can identify all the figures in this painting, but nobody has really nailed down of what this painting is supposed to be about, which is kind of strange for how big this painting is and how much time and how beloved this painting is. It's still kind of a mystery, which is pretty strange. So you have Velázquez himself, and he's standing in front of this canvas painting, and then you have Princess Margarita, two of her maids in waiting, which would be this one and this one. Then you have her favorite dwarves, which would be these two people, and then a dog, and then you have this woman in mourning here, and then and her male escort, like her buddy, and then you have this chamberlain in the doorway back here. But then we see these two figures are reflected in this mirror here. And we're like, well, what? So what's going on? Are they standing where the viewer of this actual painting is, and Velázquez is painting a portrait of these two people who are actually the king and queen? Or is Velázquez looking at a mirror and he's painting the image that we're looking at? Like, is this canvas here this painting that he's working on? So it's this kind of fun little play with optics and like, and reflection, and I just wanted to show this little image. So these are two other paintings that Velázquez did. So I put them next to the reflection here so you can see that it's clearly who's in that reflection back there. So one of the things you do know is that he's like injecting himself into the daily life of the royal household, like, you know, showing that the painter is like a more important member of the court than just like some guy that hangs out and makes paintings. He's like kind of like part of the family. And just have a couple moments of brilliance of how good of a painter he was. Like, he's painted his hand in just like a few gestures, you know, like these glops of paint on here are like actual glops of paint on the real painting. It's pretty amazing. And then how brushy this is. Just leaving paint as brushstrokes on the canvas was like kind of like super controversial at the time. But Velázquez was that good. So this is Bartolome Esteban Murillo. And the interesting thing about this painting is that the Spanish wanted the Virgin's mother also to have been a virgin. So they're really concerned about her being as pure as the Virgin. No, as Jesus, like as the Christ child. So Christ was born pure, you know, without sin. So everybody, the Spanish, really wanted the Virgin to also have come from without sin. So the Pope finally declared that she was poor, a pure soul in 1661. So this is her going to heaven after the apocalypse. So this the version of the Virgin kind of set the standard from here on in. which is kind of interesting, but also this is pretty funny. So in June of 2020, somebody took a copy of this painting, which is interesting to note because it's not the original. It's not this painting. And whenever you read these articles, they never they never say who made the copy of the painting that this person wrecked. Like, did Murillo make the copy or did some other artist make it after him? All they focus on is that somebody did this horrible botched restoration. So I guess it was like a furniture restorer, and they paid him $1,300, and he tried 2 times to do this painting, and he just wrecked it twice. All right. Not full screen. So that thus is the end of the Baroque section. You guys have any questions? And we will move on to Northern Baroque. So, first guy that pops up of import in the Northern Baroque is Rubens, Peter Paul Rubens. So he was influenced by Michelangelo, Titian, Carracci, and Caravaggio. I think you can see that in all this, in this painting. He was another Renaissance guy. He was really good with languages. He had many famous patrons and friends. He worked as a diplomat even for these royal patrons. Like, they would trust him enough to settle like their affairs with things when he was traveling, doing stuff like making paintings or selling paintings. He was a philosopher, and he was like very rich and successful. Which is cool. I think we have to take note of that when it happens, because some of these guys didn't get famous till after they died. So, in this painting is called the Elevation of the Cross. You can see his Italian influence here. Now, he spent time studying there. Definitely Michelangelo and Caravaggio. Michelangelo with like how defined and dynamic all these muscular figures are here, especially this guy. This is super Michelangelo. And then that Caravaggio, see how dark this is back here and how light Jesus is. It's also kind of important that you can see how like tan and healthy these guys look, and then Jesus is like super pale and kind of green, and he's got blood coming out of his wrist. So it's like the divine light shines upon Jesus there, and these guys are kind of not fully lit the same or as bright as Jesus is there. Anyways, then he does this like amazing foreshortening with these figures. You have this like super diagonal thing going on. So you have that Italian pyramid, remember from Leonardo and those guys, and then this foreshortening of these figures. Like this guy looks like he's going to fall out of the painting here. And this guy arching his back like that. It's just, how much more dynamic can you get? It's just so packed full of energy and like force. So yeah, the thing about the Baroque here is these Flemish churches, after a period of Protestant rule, they're kind of trying to get back into that Baroque world. So they're commissioning these. They're trying to get back into that counter. Mind blanked out there. Well, anyways, they're trying to get back in with the Catholic Church, so they would commission a bunch of paintings like this. And that's how big it is, just like humongous. Tried to get some more pictures of the installation views of some of these so you can see how big they are, people interacting with them. I think that's kind of important because I forget immediately for some reason. When you see them in a book, you know, you just, it's kind of weird because you just have this amorphic idea of them existing in space, and then you see a picture of them with a person standing in front of it, and you're like, oh yeah. Even when you see the size of it, I still feel like I need to see a picture of the thing in space. So we have the consequences of war here. And this is a commentary on the 30 Years' War. And it's an allegory. So I just went through and kind of like labeled everything that's going on because it's kind of complicated, but also obvious at the same time, which is kind of like the thing about allegories. So, like I said, Rubens was upset about the 30 Years' War. In order to illustrate that, he has, Mars, the god of war, and then you have Venus grabbing at him, trying to stop him, and you have all this horrible confusion happening over here. These two monsters back here are supposed to represent pestilence and famine, which are, the results of war, and then things that get trampled over are the arts, and things that fall by the wayside are harmony, and like this woman holding a baby represents like new babies and charity. And this guy's an architect here because he's holding his little compass, and there's this lute here to show more arts, and this book and all these little implements down here. You can see, so then we have this lady as Europe, and she's come running out of this building with her arms up in the air, helpless, and she doesn't have any jewels or cool stuff, and she's been like kind of all of her stuff is taken away, and she's up in arms about war, So I think it's interesting. But I think allegory, like this allegorical painting thing, was much more fashionable and like clever at that time. I don't know. Maybe you guys think it's clever, but it just seems really obvious to me and kind of like heavy-handed when you know those references. Like if you were like an intellectual at the time and you knew all these like Greek myths and stuff, and then you could just look at it and see it for what it was, I just kind of don't understand the appeal. I mean, it is a beautiful painting, but so here's another one of those allegorical paintings. where you have his very famous patron, Maria de Medici. So she commissioned Rubens to paint art glorifying her career as a royal and a noble. So for her palace, she commissioned 21 history / allegory paintings and 3 portraits of herself for her palace. It's just like such a crazy idea. And like, if you look at how big this painting is, it's 12 feet by 9 feet. It's like, I want a giant painting of me showing how awesome I am. So this is her returning to France from Italy. And the sea and the air welcome her, and everybody's having this crazy party. This fame flies over and like trumpets her arrival, and everybody's just so excited that she's there. You got Neptune and the Nereids, which are actually daughters of a different god, Nereus. But and this is France personified. You can see he has the robe with the fleur de lis on it, bowing to her. Just so like filled with pomp and like regalia. It's I feel like it's funny now. At the time it would probably be like super serious, and she would like really thought she was this amazing. Moving forward, so another important guy here was Franz Hals. So he's mostly a portrait painter, but he's really pushes this idea of like what a portrait painting can be like further. So he's breaking out of just like one person sitting there, looking at doing the 3/4 view with like the humble background. And like, so at the time, most of these Calvinists in the North were wearing black drab clothes, and he had to kind of like figure out a way to work around it, and like, how do you make that interesting? And he like decided by like focusing on the person and like what made them who they are, like, yeah, like their personality and individuality. So when you like look across this painting, there's all these like little interactions to stuff. Like this guy's looking at us, but this guy's looking over here at this guy, and this guy's cocking his head a little. And this guy's looking over here at these guys. This guy's looking over here. So there's all these little kind of like bits of information going on. And the way he painted these, you wouldn't do like a preliminary sketches. He would kind of like get the big canvas set up and kind of rough it out, and then he'd have them come in and sit for their individual portraits. So I think you like get to know them and like get to know like what their deal was. So you could get these like little bits of information. Like this guy's reading a book over here, so maybe he was kind of studious. And then there's also like little details, like it's hard to see, but there's 2 guys back here, and they're like walking away from us. And supposedly that's kind of like those guys died in combat. So this is like the Archers Guild, and this would be like they would commission this painting for their militia. And it was important because these like all these militias set up by these middle class dudes are played a big part in the independence of their burgeoning nation there. So I also wanted to say that it's like they're all part of a group, but they're like individual and they stand out on their own. So this is more like what like a Calvinist would look like. So this is for the women regents of the old men's home at Haarlem. So educated Dutch women at the time would be regents to orphanages, hospitals, old age homes, and prisons. And so this is him painting them as being like good, stalwart Calvinists. This is like a pretty stark contrast from like his other portraits he was commissioned to paint. So I wanted to include this one. Where's my little, here it is. So, and this is some other stuff that he's done like a ton of portraits. And I guess it's kind of like painters talking about painting, but painting somebody smiling is like wicked hard, dude. And to paint somebody smiling and not have it look like their face is cracking off is like pretty crazy. So Frans Hals was kind of like a master at that, the smiling person. So this one on the left is the Gypsy Girl, and it's not a commissioner finished portrait. It was just like a study, him figuring out how to paint her face. And this is kind of another one over here, Mal Bob, supposedly an alcoholic or mentally ill person. There's a bunch of like fun rumors about this painting though, that she was a witch or and then this thing on her shoulder was her familiar and stuff like that. But I think he just thought she was interesting and wanted to paint that face. So one of Frans Hals' followers was Judith Leister. She picked up many of his attributes. You can kind of see that with that little smile she's doing there. And then you can get some information about her in this painting. So you can see that she also took that idea of making the portrait more interesting. I think we saw some of that stuff with our other female painter, blanking on her name at this exact second because I have 100 things in my head, but she's turning to look at the viewer here, Judith is, and but she has this casual kind of vibe going on. She's not she's leaning on the back of her chair and holding her paintbrush like that. She's kind of cocking her head a little and smiling at the viewer, kind of giving you this, hey, check out how good I am at painting thing, by showing you that she's painting and then by painting herself like so astutely. She didn't usually paint a lot of these portraits though. She painted more genre paintings like this, which is kind of weird. But it has this kind of like quick, brushy vibe. And whenever there's like female painters from, old times, it's important to mention them. So then we have Rembrandt. This is Anatomy Lesson of Dr. Tulp. And this is another one of those ideas of this, it's a portrait, but it's for a surgeon's guild. So instead of just having them standing there across the front of the canvas, he's decided to show them at work. And he's done a couple interesting things here. So he doesn't put them like at a perfect horizontal, from left to right. We're at this kind of interesting foreshortened view of the table here. It's at this weird angle, which is just like if you would have put it I don't know, 20 more degrees that way. It'd have been so much easier to paint, or like 20 more degrees that way. But he picked this view, which is just basically him like showing off how awesome he is at figuring out these drawing problems that would come about by choosing this position. So they're all wearing this Protestant uniform here, but they're very distinct from one another. They're all, you can kind of like see their individualness, what they're looking at. This guy's looking at the viewer here. He seems to be looking out here somewhere. And then this is another one of those commissions for a guild. But these guys are a militia group. And this painting is, I mean, it's called the Company of Captain Franz Bonning Koch, but everybody just calls this painting Night Watch because that's what they're doing. So he's picked this important moment of the group for this group portrait where they're to like emphasize this civic pride. And they were out like guarding the town and stuff, and they commissioned this painting of themselves for their group, for their guild hall, so they could, you know, hang out in there, look at how cool they were. So the two men in front are the most important guys. This is the Captain Franz Banning Koch and his lieutenant here. And all these other guys back here are also members of the guild and help pay for this thing. Important to note this guy with the gun here. There's another guy kind of like standing here, and he has a gun going through here. It's actually, the gun is going off behind this guy's hat. Kind of gets confused with the feather in his hat. And then there's another gun right here. And those are like the important moments of a gun, like loading the gun, firing the gun, and cleaning the gun. This guy's like blowing out the leftover gunpowder residue that's in the clicky part. So it was important for them for those diagrammatical moments of gun use to be in this painting, you know. And he's got like this super Baroque lighting to show the most important guys in the middle here. It is also, this woman here is also lit, but she's kind of like a mystery. They don't really know why she's in there. She does have a dead chicken hanging from her garment here, and it's thought that maybe the that the chicken foot was the symbol for their guild, but other than that, they don't really know why she's there, kind of lit up. I feel like she looks kind of like a ghost compared to everyone else. So yeah, the painting wasn't really this dark when he painted it. It's been altered a lot. Like, this painting used to come out like this far. It is so hard to draw a straight line with this thing. He should just make it snap. So it used to come out like a lot further and taller. Like this, there's an arch back here, and the arch went like past this thing. But when they took it down from the original place, somebody cut it up. And the varnish has darkened over time, so it wasn't supposed to be this dark. But that's where you get the name, the Night Watch. So other important Rembrandt stuff, he was also a master of etching and engraving, printmaking, that is. Um, and yeah, the printmaking is, it's kind of hard to describe like without doing a bunch of drawing, but so you get like a copper plate. I'm going to draw it on here. This is the copper plate, and then on top of that you would have wax, beeswax, and then you would draw on the beeswax and it would remove this small amount of beeswax here. And then when you put it in an acid bath, the acid would etch down into the copper just where you removed the beeswax, thus creating like a little indentation in the copper. So then your copper plate has grooves cut in it like this. And when you put ink on this, these little grooves fill up with ink. And then when you put paper on top of it and run it through a press, the paper presses down into this little groove and sucks the ink up onto the paper. So engraving, etching and engraving are two different things. Engraving is you take a burl and you like cut out little pieces of the metal, but etching is this thing I just described. And when you etch something, the black parts have been etched deeper and more on purpose, and the light parts have not been etched at all, so they would still have the wax on them. And the hard part is when you're etching stuff, if you etch it too much, this cavern that you make gets deeper. It gets deeper and deeper, and then it starts to go out like this. And then eventually these little jabs break off, and then you don't have a beautiful little crevasse anymore. You have like this giant thing like this instead of your neat little, and basically it doesn't work right. The point I'm trying to make is it's really hard to get this kind of like big black space in an 11-inch by 1 foot piece of copper. Rembrandt was awesome. Also, this painting, this print was also known as the 100 guinea, 100 guilders, the 100 guilder print. And for some perspective, you could buy a house for 1,000 guilders. So it's so crazy. It's a print, so it's a piece of paper with ink pressed on it, and you can make multiple ones. So if a house costs $100,000, this print would cost $10,000, right? Yeah, it's really expensive. And then I wanted to show some of his self-portraits, and he did. There's like conflicting things. The book says he did 70 self-portraits, but I read somewhere else that he did like 35 or 40, and those other ones might be more attributed to his followers because he did have a big workshop and dudes working for him and stuff. So in the workshop, it would be like you would, like in this painting, maybe the people in the workshop would get this whole thing set up, and then maybe Rembrandt would come in and do the faces, or just do the underpainting. He would do the finished painting. It's not really clear how that worked, but and also a lot of his students had to make copies of his portraits, so I just got some definitive ones here, and I think it's just neat to look at these and see how he aged over the years, and like this Rembrandt shadow is what this thing came to be known as. See how his like this part of his face is in shadow here, and all these. And this side of his nose is in light. So if you see a painting from now on, they're ripping off Rembrandt. I mean, like, rightly so. He knows what he's doing. And I just want to show this close up. So also, if you ever see one of these in a museum, definitely go up close and look at it, because this is crazy. They're so thick with paint, and like, see how he just puts this little hit of paint to like secure that plane of the nose right there. It's just like nobody does it like Rembrandt. All these little hits of paint in here to make the eye. Just crazy. And then this squirrely stuff over here. What? All right, I'm gonna stop nerding out. Yeah, this perfect value next to this highlight. And it's all messy, but it like holds together, you know. All right, moving forward. Vermeer. He was another one of these guys. He was an innkeeper, art dealer in Delft. Delft is this town. He did a couple of these landscapes, but he was mostly doing domestic scenes of the Dutch middle class, doing stuff around the house. So here you have this woman holding a balance. It's this like idealized scene of their contemporary values. You have so there's this woman here, and she's holding this balance. She's standing in front of this painting, and the light is shining in from here perfectly onto her, slightly illuminating everything, but mostly casting on her. So what's going on here? The balance is to show that you need to live your life virtuously in a way so that you can balance out your sin. And that's to be shown by all these worldly accoutrements on the table, and she's standing in front of a painting of the Last Judgment here. This is when Jesus shows up, says these guys are good and these guys are bad, and she's right in the middle of it, so on purpose. You know, also he puts this little scale in the direct center of the painting. This is where it hangs right here. And then if you follow the lines of perspective, they even lead to her pinky right here. So it's just like masterfully, purposefully crafted down to all this little minutia. Yeah, and I wanted to show how small his painting is. I don't know who these dudes are, but this is a Vermeer that we're looking at. He captured this level of precision. It was like you're looking through a window. And part of that is due to the fact that it's believed that he used a camera obscura. I have a picture of that in the next thing so I can talk about how that worked. And there's a lot of controversy about that. People get real cranky that accusing him that he did that. like he was cheating or something, but his paintings are so beautiful and perfect. It's like, it's not like he traced it. It's just like he used it as like a reference guide to, um, you know, capture things. And he made a lot of innovations to the way painting is kind of like contrived, but also like how he painted, like these little, it's like little shapes of color. Like if you zoom in, it almost looks like blurry because there's no like super hard lines. But if you take a step back, like the little blurs like hold together like super sharp. It's crazy how he painted. And then also there's color in his shadows. Like this is like a dark blue shadow, you know. It's not just um, like shadows aren't just like black and brown. Like even Leonardo said that to make a shadow, you mix black and brown with it, which is, I mean, it's one way of doing it. It's not wrong. It's just it's new. It's new to put color in shadows. So this is Vermeer here, sitting with his back to the viewer. And then you can't see the source of the light from over here. It's kind of like this would be artistic inspiration shining down on his muse here, the woman. So I threw this in here to show this, how it may have worked, but yeah. So you can see this would be this, if you were looking, basically if you were looking from over here, if this wall was exploded and you were looking in on this image, he would be, yeah, does that make sense? And this is Vermeer right here. I know this isn't French, but it doesn't matter. I just wanted to show how you see this image and then there's a little hole, and then the image gets projected onto like a screen and is reversed, and then he would like look at that, and it kind of shows him tracing it, but I don't know, maybe he did, but there would be like weird distortions and stuff, and like if it goes through I don't know if you guys know about lens distortion, but when you take a picture and you stand closer to a thing with a picture, like the stuff in the middle is cool, but then this stuff out here becomes like kind of skewy and like rounded and stuff because of the lens. So it makes it really hard to photograph artwork accurately. So this is another version, which I kind of think like maybe he used one of these because all of his paintings are so small, like that one we saw in the gallery. And then this would be where this little transparency he would draw on or view the image on. So there was a mirror flipping it back to correct the inversion of the lens. Some kind of fun stuff with old Vermeer. So Poussin, this guy was very excited about classicism. He lived in Rome for a little while, and he loved Titian and Raphael. I think you kind of see that in here after talking about Titian and Raphael, like how accurate Raphael was, and this guy was like, yes, please, I'll do that. Though he was like during the time of Baroque, he wasn't really into all that like dynamic action and like filling up like the painting with like all this. I mean, I already said dynamic action, but he wasn't into that. This was more his speed. He had very strong opinions of what art should be. He started writing a treatise about the grand manner, like about what the subject should be, um, thought, structure, and style. So he was like, really had some strong opinions about it. It should be about battles or heroic action or divine things. And then he's really excited about that perfect composition and proportion. I studied Polykleitos, the ancient Greek artist. So Polykleitos had that prescription for the perfect statue, and he was like, yes, I'll take those proportions, thank you. So here we have St. John on Patmos. Interestingly about this painting is that it has kind of this no, trying to use a big word and saying it wrong, anachronistic landscape. So it's like out of time. You have Greek ruins and Egyptian ruins in this made up landscape. So he's trying to say something here. Also, you need to know that St. John is writing about the end of times, the last judgment. And we know this is St. John because there is an eagle right here. And the eagle was the symbol of the evangelist. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting that we have like these ruins of the old world. He's sitting in contemporary time and he's writing about the future. So we kind of have like this broad span of time captured in one painting. So this is kind of like ideas that Poussin was excited about. The only thing worth painting was like the most grandiose topic you can imagine. And yeah, it's kind of saying that like, though these things have fallen, Christianity will be eternal. A couple other things to note. This painting is actually in Chicago at the museum there. So that'd be cool. Oh yeah, Art Institute Chicago, it says right here. Do I have a painting? Oh. Yeah, this is just another Poussin painting. And you have these three shepherds trying to decipher what's on this sarcophagus here, and this is a spirit of death looking over them. But the important thing is to note Poussin and his style, because he's going to come up again in a little bit. All right, that one's done. I think we should be good for time today now that I'm thinking about it. I have one more regular slideshow that's kind of short, and then the midterm review. So I was kind of scared that we were going to go wicked long, but okay. Any questions or anything? Yeah, I'll go over everything specifically that we're gonna. I'm just gonna go over the whole test, and then you can um, study and come up with your own answers and stuff. No curveballs. Anything else? Okay, barreling into Rococo. So, I sometimes I kind of give my opinion on artists or paintings and stuff. I feel like maybe I shouldn't do that because I remember um, when I took art history, some teachers talking when we learned about the Rococo artists, they kind of like poo-pooed them, and I that kind of stuck with me, and I never really got into them. But since I've been teaching this class and looking at these paintings, I really like them. So maybe just don't take my opinion for granted. Like, no, it's my opinion when I'm talking about that stuff, because I don't want to influence like what you like or don't like. These are just my ideas and my perspective. Sometime, like when I'm saying my, you get it. Anyways, so we have Watteau here. He's kind of like the initial Rococo painter. We have here the Pilgrimage to Cythera, the island of eternal youth and love. And this painting has kind of some fun little stuff going on. These paintings are all super fun. They're super like frivolous, like how they're painted, the colors they use, the subject matter, and all that. Like if you think about um, France at the time and think about, you know, rich guys living in, or rich people living in um, Versailles with powdered wigs, and how separated the aristocracy was from regular peasant folks. And we'll kind of get into that more next week when we talk about neoclassicism and like the French Revolution. But here, before that stuff had happened, they are still very disconnected from the, the lower class. So we have paintings like this, where you have these pilgrims, these people coming to party on Party Island, basically. You have this sculpture. Where's my little, I don't know. Can't find my, oh, there it is. Oh well, can't point at stuff. Well, this sculpture, that sculpture on the far right, that's Aphrodite with all those um, flowers all over, and then there's an arrow sticking out of the ground. There's a little quiver of arrows, like um, Cupid's mom and all that. So they're on the island, this mythical island, mythical party island, and they're all gallivanting and having a good time. And if you notice, there these this string of people from left to right or right to left, depending on how you want to read it, is these couples, and they're all in different levels of courtship. You see this couple on the right. The guy's kind of like leaning over her, and she's like coyly looking away. And then the next one, they're dancing, and the next one, the guy's got his arm around the woman and she's looking away, that she's not really into it. But so you have all these like flirtatious little things going on, and it's hard to know whether they're, dang it, whether they're coming or going. There's this island in the background here, like maybe that's Cythera, or maybe they're on it already. You have this boat, that golden kind of monstrosity on the left there. And yeah, they're all caught in this hazy, fluffy, fun place. And this is turned into be kind of a problematic thing for the French Royal Academy at the time, because they were used to like these more traditional paintings, like all that stuff we were just looking at, like Poussin, and he was like a teacher there and didn't like stuff like this. So they came up, it didn't fit into any categories they had, so they had to come up with a new category. That's where you get this term up here, fête galante. It's rich people having a rich people party outside, trying to court each other. So that the other important thing is that they were angry. So you had this, it came down to like this battle at the French Academy between these two sides, the Poussinists and the Rubinists. And the Poussinists valued all that stuff that Poussin was into, because he was a teacher there at the time. Line, value, organization, accuracy, anatomy, all that divine stuff we talked about. Then we had the other guys that were following more Rubens tradition, where you have color as the most important driving force of the painting, and this imitation of life and manipulation of color. So basically, the Rococo artists were not thrown out in the streets. Then moving forward, we have Boucher, and he was a big portraitist guy, but he liked the fun stuff more, painting nymphs and shepherds and goddesses. But this is like one of those guys I'm talking about, like, look at this, like that cherub lying down, and how how dynamic the body is, like all those angles. I wish I could draw on this, it's driving me crazy. Oh, there it is. Play from current slide. Okay, here we go. You have this, if you follow like this rhythm that's created by this figure here, it's just like, it's amazing. I love how this figure is looking out this way. Her chest is this way. The hips are popping this way. It's like, it's the stuff I get excited about figure drawing and painting. Especially this foreshortened face is so good. So anyways, this is kind of like that that height of the sensual playfulness. And he's exploiting that Baroque dynamism for fluffy, fanciful displays of prosperity and wealth. So, yeah, I included a portrait. So this is Boucher, but it's painted by Gustave Lundberg, different guy. I just think he looks so exactly what I thought he would look like when I was looking at a painting that he did. He looks very pleased with himself. So moving forward to Fragonard, who I think pushed this Rococo style to the max. This painting's called The Swing, and I didn't mention it before, but these paintings, you know, they were for the aristocracy to look at. They wanted to see paintings of themselves doing rich people stuff. Maybe I said that, but I wanted to say it specific. So Fragonard was this beautiful colorist. You can see these light, fluffy brush strokes here. Oh, I lost my arrow again. Well, you can see these light, fluffy brush strokes in the background with that atmospheric perspective. You know, they get so light and fluffy, the trees almost turn into clouds back there. You have this circular, amorphic composition, the kind of thing that Poussin would hate. You have this super candy-coated saccharine pink in the front that's just screaming away from that green background. And then the subject matter, you have this woman flirtatiously flipping her shoe off while she kicks her leg up in the air, and then her buddy down there in the bottom left is like looking up her skirt, and so they're kind of flirting, and then you have Cupid over there on the left looking down at them knowingly, and he's kind of giving them the A-OK. Cupid likes seeing moments like this kind of thing. And then, but on the right, you have this member of the clergy here, and he's pulling on the rope, which is kind of a little bit of social commentary, which makes this painting different than the other ones, you know, because they were just displaying these moments of frivolity, where this one actually has a little commentary. So this clergy guy, why is he in there? Is it because is it saying that the church is like looking at this kind of behavior in society and not doing anything about it, or are they actually actively participating in it? So that's that kind of thing going on. Yeah, I just love this painting. And then moving forward, we have this dude, Jean-Baptiste Greuze. So we're still in this period of Rococo in France, but like they're starting to get a little bit of a sweet tooth and want something more humble, maybe more naturalistic. So something with more of a moral backbone, so to speak. So here we have this like rustic farmhouse interior, and it's this scene of this married couple. They're not married yet, but the figure in white and then the man standing, you see their arms are intertwined, so they're like young husband and wife to be, and then the man with his arms outstretched, that's the bride's father, and he's offering his daughter up to this young man, and he's giving him the dowry, the money to start their family, you know. And then this seated woman on the left in the brown is the mother, and she's holding onto her hand, and she's sad. You know, everybody's sad that the daughter's leaving. You got the other younger sister holding onto her shoulder. She's crying. Everyone's sad, except for the older sister on the right behind the father. She's jealous. But it's just kind of like this naturalistic, it's more like this idealized version of like poor people in there, and how it's, if you're closer to nature and the earth, then you're more virtuistic. And then we even have like a couple, this little allegory thing on the bottom with the chicken and the chicks, and one chick has left the pack and is sitting on that bowl away from the family, as the daughter to be married off will soon leave the group. So happiness is the reward of a natural virtue. Moving forward, we have Elizabeth Louise Viggy Lebrun, and she paints in this Rococo style. It's this like light, fluffy brush stroke thing, but it's very not fake. It's more naturalistic. She's wearing normal clothes. It's unpretentious, you know. And then she's looking right at the viewer, just to show like how she's like a straight shooter, you know. So it's interesting because she actually got into the Royal Academy because she was friends with Marie Antoinette. She actually she got a commission from Marie Antoinette when she was like younger, and then she did like 30 commissions of Marie Antoinette. So this is one of her paintings that she did of Marie Antoinette in Versailles here. You know, Marie Antoinette was the person that whole like "let them eat cake" quote comes from, which is said to be not true, but I think it's a good way to like think about Marie Antoinette and how far away aristocracy was from the peasants. Like peasants like worked their whole life. All their money and stuff went to taxes, and like the aristocracy, like in the royals were like so out of touch with that. Like, you know, in Versailles, like Marie Antoinette would have like farm stuff brought in so she could like run around and play pretend like she was a farmer, like really crazy out of touch stuff. So then, and people were getting wind of these things and they didn't like her that much. So she was trying to get back in with the good graces of the people. And the people had heard that she was, you know, a bad mom, and she was like, had lovers outside of her marriage. So this painting was meant to win back the opinion of the people. So she's painted here with her kids, and this empty crib shows that one of her children died, and she has this very austere, kind of like sad demeanor. And but this painting didn't work. It did not help gain back the love and trust of the people. And 6 years later, the French Revolution happened, and she was beheaded. And I don't have an artist for this piece because I can never find one, like who actually made this, but there's many depictions of this act, but this one seems to be of the time. So anyways, we'll get more into the French Revolution next week with neoclassicism, David, and all that. But that's French time for now. Any questions moving into the midterm? Yeah, you still have the PowerPoint too. There's kind of a lot going on this week. I think there's three quizzes, the PowerPoint and the midterm. But it's not too crazy, I think. So I'm just going to go over kind of like general stuff about each of these, and then maybe, so not to give you like all the information, so you guys can do some studying on your own and then fill in the blanks a little. But I'll give you all the questions that are going to be on there. So please describe the symbolism and important characteristics of Jan van Eyck's painting Giovanni Arnolfini and his wife. So some important things about this painting, what's going on in this painting. What are they doing? Is it clear? Are they taking their marriage vows? Are they, is she definitively pregnant or is she not? Talk about some of the symbolism going on, like the aspects of wealth that we can see here, like the fruit and the golden adornments, the clothing, and then the reflection in the mirror. I mean, the mirror just as a piece of expensive property, and then the reflection in the mirror showing the artist and the mystery figure. And then, the other little things like the dog as a symbol of fidelity, and the whisk broom, and what does that mean, and the finial with St. Margaret. You have the man closer to the window and the woman closer to the bed. Any questions about that one? What are the main features of Pontormo's Entombment of Christ that define it as Mannerist? So Mannerism was that reaction to the perfection of Renaissance. You have these elongated forms, the odd or mysterious theme, the unbalanced composition, and the unclear narrative. as seen by these people's faces, and also, you know, where's the cross or the tomb? What's going on here? It's called the entombment, but there's no tomb, or it's called the deposition, but there is no cross. What is contrappasto? Who used it originally? Name at least one example from the Renaissance. So this one's pretty straightforward, I think. You know, got it from the ancient Greeks. It's that hip dropping to one side where the shoulders cocked the other way. One leg straight, one leg's bent. And we could talk about any sculpture you want to talk about or painting. I feel like if I actually tell you guys, then everybody's just going to say the same thing, and I don't want that. And then, yeah, that humanistic influence from the Greek on the Renaissance, and then bringing back that contrappasto theme throughout their artwork. The key compositional factors in Masaccio's tribute money. Why was an important step forward in the early Renaissance? So we can talk about the atmospheric perspective and the linear perspective, where the points of atmospheric perspective lead to and why. Talk about how there is still lingering aspects of medieval artwork at play here, such as the continuous narrative. And then, but he still made that step forward with the, unified light source. So it's another one. Based on what you know about Michelangelo and Leonardo, who do you think had the greater impact on art history? Support your argument with specific works of art. So this is more like your opinion that I'd like to hear. Obviously, there's no right answer of like whether Michelangelo was better than Leonardo or vice versa. It's I just want to hear what you guys think and kind of like what you can extrapolate from either of those and what you know from what we talked about and from the book. Like, you know, make an argument and then use like a couple pieces of art to defend yourself. So like, I think I'm kind of leaving this pretty open so that, you know, if you use like 3 examples of artwork, you'll probably get an A. If you use like 1 to none, you'll probably get like a C or a D. Please describe some of the main characteristics of Cimabue's Madonna Enthroned and the innovations Giotto made when he painted his version. So Cimabue's version was still influenced by that Byzantine Italian style, where Mary is very large in the center and has a very stylistic halo around her, as do the other people. Everything about this is very stylistic and unnaturalistic. Her being bigger than everybody else is that hierarchical scale to show the viewer that she's the most important thing. All these figures are stacked on top of each other. in a very strange way, but you can see all their faces. The throne is not really making any attempt at perspective. It's like perspective is, I don't know, kind of like an idea at this point in this painting. It's not really like mathematically determined. If you look at the chair, you know. And the rendering under her chin here is very subtle, so there's not a lot of modeling at all. And even so far as the highlighting on her dress is gold. I guess I'm kind of giving you guys everything for this one. And then for like, what did Giotto do to improve that or change those things? Maybe I can leave it there. So I talked about this one today, looking at Bernini's sculpture of David. What makes it decidedly Baroque? How is Bernini's David different from past versions we've seen? So yeah, talked about that today. Talk about the Counter-Reformation, dynamism, the height of the important action, this energy wrapped up like a spring here, ready to explode. I'm trying to think of the word that I want to say, like impending energy, or like yeah, built-in compressed energy that's about to explode out of this. Well, that makes it very Baroque. And you know, what other answers you can come up with for that, how much more stuff you can think of. And then, how is Bernini's David different from past versions we've seen? So we talked about that today. You know, you compare his to Michelangelo's David or Donatello's. Another one from today, we got Caravaggio. Describe Caravaggio's style and the innovations he made to painting. How are some of these techniques put to work in the Calling of St. Matthew? So some of the innovations he made, you know, tenebrism, putting the idealized, taking figures out of like idealized places and putting them like in a natural common habitat, such as a traditionally very important spiritual moment, such as the Calling of St. Matthew, and putting it in a bar. You know, showing that St. Matthew had a day job with his coins there, and he was just a regular tax collector out doing his work while Jesus showed up and called him to duty. Also, downplaying that this is Jesus and just having this very light hint at halo here. And it goes in with tenebrism, the using light as a instrument to direct the narrative. Yeah. I didn't mention it before, but it's also interesting that you can see that there's a space at the table here for the viewer, like as you could like come sit down with them at the table. Just kind of a fun little moment in that painting. Please talk about the significance of the Venus of Urbino by Titian and describe the formal elements he used to construct the painting, as well as the reference he was citing. So, she was a Greek goddess, and taking her out of that context and putting her in a house with handmaidens and stuff made her like a normal person. And this was kind of abnormal at the time in the Renaissance to see a nude figure, but because she was a Greek goddess, it kind of made it okay. Still very provocative. She's looking at the viewer, covering her hands with her genitals, kind of like has this like sensuality to it, if you will. And in the subject matter and how Titian has painted it, with how soft his touch of the brush was, with like her skin and like the transparency of the paint. You can talk about her kind of strange proportions going on here of how long her torso is, and this arm somehow being attached to her. She's like so slender and thin compared to this beefy arm. And then this magical moment of anatomy here with the, which could not be true, but he like makes it happen with the foreshortening of this shin with the foot back there. And you got like the little stand-in for Cupid, and then you can talk about the masterful use of composition and how he broke up the space, leading the viewer back on this journey to this little window back here. And yeah, I think that's enough. Fragonard, we talked about him today. Please discuss the narrative features and formal characteristics of Fragonard's painting. The swing, what style of painting is this? Who are the patrons of this painting, of a painting like this, and why? So yeah, we just talked about all that stuff. I don't know if we have to go over this one. Patrons were the aristocracy. Yeah. And talk about all those little things like the shoe being kicked off and the flirtatious gaze and this little guy with the social commentary and this guy looking down at here and the fluffy brush strokes and the color, the composition, and just kidding. Yeah, so I think that's it for that one. And that's the end. Do you guys want to talk about anything else? Any other questions? I always say that I'm gonna like only give a little bit of information, and then I feel like I give a lot, but I think there's still some stuff in there that you guys could study and kind of impress me with an A. So that's all I have prepared for today, folks. Yeah, like a paragraph. Short answer, you know, probably at least 3 sentences. Any other questions? Is there only one opinion answer that we went over earlier? Oh yeah, like the Michelangelo versus Leonardo thing. Yeah, I think that's the only opinion one I put in there. Oh yeah, also I forgot to tell you guys. So the uh you're you have to study all 10 of those, but you're only gonna have 5 of them are gonna pop up randomly when you sign in to do the test. So I mean, study and get your stuff ready, but I don't think it'll take as long as doing 10 essay questions, you know. Okay. No problem. Welcome.